Human Rights Watch has urged the Southern African development community to condemn Zimbabwe's escalating crackdown on opposition and civil society groups ahead of the upcoming 44th summit in Harare on August 17. President Emmerson Mnangagwa is set to assume the chairmanship of the SADC during this summit. Since coming to power in a military coup in 2017, the Mnangagwa administration has been accused of serious human rights abuses and has failed to implement significant reforms. Human Rights Watch, alongside other organizations, has documented numerous cases where the Zimbabwean judicial system has been ineffective in addressing alleged human rights violations. Ahead of the summit, Human Rights Watch is calling on SADC leaders to address these concerns and push for meaningful reforms in Zimbabwe. To discuss this, we're joined by Allan Ngari, Africa Advocacy Director at Human Rights Watch. Hello, Allan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Can you detail the specific human rights abuses that Human Rights Watch has documented in Zimbabwe under President Mnangagwa's leadership? How have these violations escalated since he assumed power?
Since the ousting of former President Robert Mugabe in 2017, like you earlier mentioned, we have documented serious concerns of the government's failure to institute legal and political reforms necessary for citizens to freely express themselves, no matter what their political views are. Under President Mnangagwa, we have seen serious human rights violations that include abductions, enforced disappearances, arbitrary detentions, excessive use of force. The list can go on. It's quite long. There are a lot of examples that we have cited in our reports, and these are of serious concern to not just us, but to other civil society and opposition members in Zimbabwe.
Okay. Now, what does the SADC chairmanship mean for Zimbabwe, particularly considering its impact on the region's human rights landscape, especially for countries with fragile democracies or even those facing similar human rights challenges?
You know, it's an important question you asked there, and especially because Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa is going to chair SADC as of August 17th this year. But it's important for these regional institutions like SADC to send very strong signals to the Mnangagwa administration that there are flagrant violations of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as well as other human rights treaties that Zimbabwe is a part of, and that this is just unacceptable. As we speak, over 70 activists are in detention. There were some that have been released following the Day of the African Child celebrations in June 16. But as he takes over as chair of SADC, SADC should really move swiftly to end rights violation and uphold the rule of law in that country.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on what you said. What specific actions is Human Rights Watch urging SADC to take to address the human rights situation in Zimbabwe?
I think first is to publicly demonstrate that SADC disapproves of the abuses taking place in that country and to demand that the government of Zimbabwe restore basic civil and political rights. We think that the Zimbabwean authorities should focus on implementing key reforms. These have been discussed over a number of years to improve respect for human rights, but also to really make the letter and spirit of the Zimbabwean Constitution come to life. A Section 210 of the Constitution really establishes independent mechanisms, providing remedies for complaints and misconduct of security services. We need to see these bodies acting independently and effectively.
While they're acting independently, how do you think that the organization would or plans to leverage its influence, which is very important, to ensure that the SADC follows through on these actions?
Well, it's our view that that the Southern African development community can play a leadership role in placing human rights issues on the regional agenda, despite there have been there's so many countries in the Southern Africa region that have failed to protect human rights in their home. But we really do believe that this is an opportunity for Zimbabwe to stand up as it takes on this chairmanship, but also for SADC to emphasize that that the Mnangagwa government should demonstrate that it is serious about upholding human rights and the rule of law.
All right. Now, you did talk about, some of the organizations failing to protect human rights. Now, given the SADC's track record of insufficient responses to human rights crisis within its member states, Allan, what assurances exist that the organization will take decisive measures to tackle Zimbabwe's human rights issues?
Well, the elections in Zimbabwe last year showed a different picture in terms of the SADC Observer Mission report, which really did document some of the excesses of the state, some violations of civil and political rights as it relates to casting votes and the right to vote, the freedom of association. So I believe that the SADC Secretariat is really on the right track in actually stemming some of these challenges that we have been raising over the years. So the tide is changing, and there's really a good opportunity for SADC to engage with Zimbabwe on these issues going forward.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Allan, for speaking to us on this. Thank you.
Thank you.